Thank you very much for coming all. I hope you're enjoying your time, and in the afternoon and the next days we will do a lot of reading with Stuart on Vinaya material, and I want to give you some idea why actually I invited Professor Young to be here. One of the reasons is besides him being a very nice person, which is also important, and eager to come, which is also important, willing to come, which is very important, of course, Vinaya. Vinaya and material culture, which is my field actually, and on which we have worked a lot and we still work. And I want to show what Vinaya can mean for material culture, or how you can integrate material culture into Vinaya. And this is also topics that Stuart is going to discuss and we are going to read in the next days. So this will be a kind of interactive lecture. I'll ask you a few questions, and actually what I want to do is to raise your interest and to see also what methodologies are possible, and maybe I hope that some of you can also point out you could do this or you could do that, so let's inspire each other. We're working from Buddhist monasteries from ancient India to China, so my field actually, when it's coming to the Tang, it's getting very modern, and in the Sung it's nearly postmodern for me. So because I try to work on China and what is China doing, or what are Chinese masters doing when they see normative texts coming from India. How do you deal with that? It's the word of the Buddha, it's the Vinaya, but it's a completely different context. So you need to somehow adapt it without saying that you adapt it, because you can never adapt the words of the Buddha or of Buddhism. So you need to find or to accommodate with this giving of these data. So Buddhist monasteries, in interaction of course with the lay community, you all know that people in Buddhist monasteries, they live very much in society, and yesterday Stuart pointed out too, they are very much part of society. In Tunhuang you might not even see the difference, although I think there still is a difference, we can discuss that. In other parts of China I remain convinced that it's much more traditional, or at least people live much more in the monastery compared to Tunhuang. The time is early Buddhism, so place would be India. Of course you have to know very well what is in the Indian text without contextualizing it too much, because the contextualization takes place in China. So it's what the Chinese people think of what happened in India. That's actually what I'm doing mostly. It doesn't mean that you cannot contextualize the Vinaya in India, but that's a different study. People in the 5th century, they had no clue on the exact life of a monk or a nun 700 years before in India. They read the text and they did something with it. Okay? And this is, of course, what we would call study of material culture. To give you a little bit of background of myself, as you might know, I started with rules for nuns because I like to know what about women in Buddhism. When I started to do that, there was really not much on women, and I mean this is nearly 30 years ago, says something about my age. Gender issues, and of course Vinaya material. I'm very much interested in rules, in normative rules, and what people do with it. I'm usually looking for signs, but in this old building we don't have that many signs, but I would not be surprised to find a sign saying no drinks and food in the room, where we would all have our coffee and water, and we would not think this is going against the rules. So we understand them in a certain context. We don't eat hamburgers here, but we might eat an apple without any problem. So this is the same for other rules, also for women and so on. Then I moved to something which is more material culture even, so I left a little bit the gender studies behind me. Of course I remain interested, but I think also if you move on in your academic lives, it's good every 5 to 10 years to take a different angle, because at a certain point you might get tired of your own research. So to give you a little bit of new things to do, change every now and then, not completely because that's overwhelming, but see which angles you find in your studies. Angles I found, of course, when you go on to work on rules is the body, and especially waste. So washing, toilet, tooth cleaning, you said something on tooth cleaning yesterday too, cutting hairs, nails, clothes, including shoes, sleeping, including sleeping material, movement, including sport and other activities. This is actually the last part of that series that I'm working on with Jutsu Lung. Some know her as Melody. We are finishing that part. And I'm already, because I've worked now on this for many years, so I'm moving to next topic, which will be the annoying and dangerous animals like mosquitoes, who got me yesterday evening too. And yeah, I like that too. I'm always looking for angles that are really very much material and daily life. So that's the methodology I'm trying. What do we know about the practices of the people? Yeah? Of course, I know philosophy is very interesting, so don't get away from philosophy. But for me, it's what's happening and how far can we know that? Because there's a lot we cannot know. But how far can we know at least the attitudes towards, for instance, a mosquito? Imagine you have a mosquito sitting here now. Are you automatically going to do this? Or and then hoping it's, please, what are you going to do? And these are issues that you all find in the Vinaya. You would be surprised to see now how much material you find on mosquito nets, not made in silk, Stuart. I have not found any silk mosquito nets yet. Maybe when I move to China, I don't know, but mosquito nets are very important. Or, for instance, the water strainer. Yeah, you cannot even walk in the street without a water strainer, in theory, for the monks. Maybe they were made in silk, but the material is not specified in the Vinaya.
Yeah, I Ching discusses it.
I Ching, but that's the Chinese, yes, I know. And I'm sure that in China we'll find it. But in India you find a lot of material made in silk, but not the mosquito nets and the water strainer and so on. So, which might point to it that I think silk was more available in China than it was in India. I think it was much more common in China to use silk than silk was much more a luxury product, I think, still in India. While in China, it's what you wear, and that's what I Ching would say too. If you refuse silk in China, you're actually kind of refusing the common things. So you're arrogant. You want luxury instead of silk, which everyone is just using. So that's his argument, but I'm sure you're going to say much more about that. So, material culture, if you want an introduction to what material culture is, I can really point you to John Kishnick's work. I think many of you know that. And he has done a great thing. He wrote in an encyclopedia, and I can send you some of the references. I see now it's not on here. On what is material culture. It's always very difficult to write this kind of thing. What is material culture, and then write it. He has a great definition. Material culture is generally defined as artifacts, as well as ideas about and conduct, that's important also, related to artifacts, with artifacts limited to material objects made or altered by human beings. I added a bit to that, because certainly in body, everything that's connected to body will create a reaction and an emotion, but a lot of things on the body are also made to avoid reaction and to avoid emotion. Yeah? You have a lot of objects that are, we could call religious objects, statues, we talked about that. But you also have a lot of objects that are meant to be there to actually avoid any other emotion that might arise. To give you an example, you clean your teeth to avoid people saying, oh, you have a bad breath today. So you don't clean your teeth in a monastery to say, oh, you smell good today. No, but in order to avoid people saying, what have you eaten yesterday? Was it garlic, by the way? So these kind of things. So avoid reaction, avoid emotion. Yeah? If you have been sweating a lot, you should be careful that people don't smell you. It says something about Buddhism, because basically you could also say, why not? Why would people not just be able to smell me? If I'm sweating, I'm sweating. But it shows something on the position, the social position that monastics wanted to acquire in the text. They have to be exemplary, and smell, and that's really a topic people could work on. Smell in Buddhism is something that needed to be avoided, to a large extent. The idea of the nice incense, and so it's much later things. Basically, it's no smell, no reaction. That's the basic thing. Yeah? So they use perfume, but not to smell nicely, but to avoid smelling badly. See? So that's what I mean also with material culture and avoiding reaction and emotion. So what is the material culture? Of course, we all need theory, and a person I like, I know is a bit maybe old-fashioned, but I still think that for material culture in Buddhism, his ideas work very well. The ideas of Pierre Bourdieu, you might know him, French philosopher, but translated in a lot of different languages, also in Chinese. You can read him in Chinese. He works a lot on structures, and I like particularly such sentences as structured structure, predisposed to function as structuring structures. I'm always happy after having said this sentence. But, for instance, when I work on toilet, it's important, isn't it? I mean, you're going to go to the ladies' room. If you're a lady, you're going to go to the men's room if you're a man. And why so? Because there's a sign. The ladies is on the first floor, by the way, or the ground floor, as you would say here, and so you just go there. Yeah. So structures, they function as structuring structures, because you're going just to follow the signs. Try to go against them and say, "Oh, I don't care. What's the problem if I go into a man's toilet and I just use it?" Well, some people might really see this as a problem. Why is that so? Then you start to find, and in Vinaya you find a lot of motives for these things. They don't only say why this or that is or what happens, they also often say why they do things. Why is it wrong to go into a man's toilet as a lady? They will tell you. You can find this obvious, but it's not always obvious. There are cultures where you just go together to the toilet, and there are certainly cultures where man would go with man without a door in between. There was a great photo, I don't see if at the Olympic Games in Russia, where apparently in that region people just go together to the toilet, and some athletes were really shocked. So, oh, this must not be finished. It was just the way that people did it. So, by the way, one of the things that in the Vinaya and certainly in India was very much against proper rules is cleaning your teeth in the presence of others. So the next time you get into any kind of airport and you want to clean your teeth in the bathroom of the airport, think about that some people see this as really going to the toilet in front of their nose. So you might say, oh, it's not my problem, but it might be the problem of someone else. So that's the idea that they discuss. And that's what Pierre Bourdieu has discussed a lot. Of course, he also discusses that you have to see the framework of historical and social conditions in a certain time and a certain place, because this changes. And it shapes identity. Material culture and the way you behave will shape your identity. Yeah? We can give a lot of examples, like some people, they like to make noise when they eat in some cultures. In some other cultures, it's completely forbidden. Now, how many people would not say, it's a Chinese eating soup? Nice, I would say. But people react on that. Why do they react on that? Well, that's the question. Is that wrong? Am I now making a joke? Have I offended anyone? I hope not. That's not my aim. But I want to tell you that these kind of things shape identity more than we think. Really more than we think. Sometimes, for instance, what is very annoying for Chinese people is the way we clean our nose, and we put then this paper in our pocket, and then you see people looking at what she's doing, and make sure, can you not clean your nose in a little bit less noise? Shape, big noses and make a lot of noise. Shape identity, and we laugh with it, but actually that's really important to get along. And that's what the Buddhists really got. Shape identity of the monastic community and of the place where you are. And Pierre Bourdieu will discuss also how do you transfer this to new conditions, and of course also what's the role of the contact with the so-called others. Who are the others? So these are all issues I like to discuss, and also with my students. Why bodily care? I will not speak about gender because I like to focus on the material culture today. it goes, of course, beyond daily life. And someone pointed out to me that Norbert Elias, I can really recommend it. He has written a work on medieval and pre-modern France. Written in German, translated in French, became immensely popular in French. It's now also translated in English. And he says, when taking out of isolation and grouped together, bodily practices, and this is important, among which the scope for individual variation within the social standard is relatively small. You can say, I don't care about the difference between men and women. So I enter any toilet I want to do. Well, your individual variation will be relatively small. Yeah? You can do so, but I'm not so sure that you will have a happy life by doing that. So actually, it's relatively small to go against all these things. So they also offer a view of a process, and that's what he saw in France. He says, a gradual transformation of behavior and emotion that is characterized by an expanding threshold of aversion, which, and this is my theory when you can contradict me, but I think that when we see Buddhism moving from India to China, we have not an expanding threshold of aversion, but an expanding or an advancing purity threshold. We can discuss that, but I think that the threshold of purity, at least in theory and normatively, is growing when the Vinaya rules go from India to China. Yeah? So I'll try to convince you a little bit about that. Okay, bodily care, self-image, of course, in Chinese society, common code, you know that, and of course the inner identity of the Chinese Buddhist community, which remains important, and that's also why I say that Tuanhuang is quite exceptional, because if you see other masters like Tao Xuan, for instance, or Ta Jie reacting, or writing, it's certainly very different from what we see, and also from the archaeological findings and from other texts, the life must have been quite different in central India compared to Tuanhuang, which is really a quite intriguing case actually. And also I think that in Tuanhuang you had the monasteries and the people living outside of the monasteries. So there was interaction, but you do have monasteries that were still somehow kept by someone. Sometimes I think it's to be compared to the Nepalese situation. You know, in Nepal, you also have people who keep the monastery, but you have a lot of people who live outside of the monastery and temporarily go back for rituals and so on. So maybe it's in that way that we have to see it. Clothes, for those who are now in this region, are really much like also George Figarello, who said that cleanliness was linked to decency rather than hygiene. This is something we also see, I think, in the Vinaya text. Cleanliness is more important than hygiene. People did not know that you had to wash your hands after going to the toilet. People did not know that this could make someone else sick. That's not the idea. The idea is that you have to have clean hands, not healthy hands. And by the way, I like this, I added this, you know, the decency prompted French people in the Middle Ages to emphasize the visible parts of their body and clothing. And basically, I think that's also important in Buddhism. I mean, you show that you're clean. And you know, in France, you get more and more of these white things. That was actually the underwear. Huh? You have seen this probably in movies. Yeah, you see people having this white cotton coming out everywhere. Basically, that's the underwear that they show. They want to show, my underwear is clean. That's how it started. They very often then don't have any underwear anymore, but they just show that they are clean. That's why it's white. Yeah? We are clean, exemplary people. Clothes are very important also in Buddhism, of course. So let me go to a few examples. But first of all, I'm going to ask, do you have any questions? I'm just knocking you down in an early morning. Actually, why clothes? Of course, Gregory Chopin is another person who has worked a lot on it. So clothes are intimately linked with questions of identity, and that's why I reacted also, Stuart, on your painting. I think for some ceremonies they put on these clothes, And then they do these ceremonies, these rituals, or at least on paintings. They will shave the hair at that time, certainly. Maybe it grows a bit longer than the hair of others, but people need at a certain time to show we are monks. And somehow they do it by clothes and by the hair. Certainly at rituals. So I think that's still important. You also have today in some monasteries in China, you have people changing their clothes. There were this kind of kashaya with two different kinds. A very colorful in the day and a very simple one in the evening. To give them two different identities. A very interesting topic also. So people could, in modern days, really work on that. I see you saying, yes, well, I encourage you to work on that. You had one student who unfortunately then chose a different way of life. He's also very interested in art, so he went into art. But he had a very good master thesis already on this aspect. So I'm very intrigued on this double identity, which you've shown actually also in your picture. Colorful, and then in the evening, very one color, as our colleague there is very.
Is that distinction specified in the Vinyas of very colorful during the day?
No. That must be some development somewhere, particularly in China. So I'm very intrigued by that. So it would be a very interesting topic. Wu Tai Shan, you have monks doing that. So I would like to know why, and where does it come from? And it's certainly not in the Vinaya, absolutely not.
Contemporary practice?
Sorry?
Contemporary practice?
Yes, it is contemporary practice, but it's certainly not invented today. I mean, there must be a history behind it. So, and when you showed yesterday these, I was thinking, maybe there is some link there. So a topic. Robes in the Vinaya should not display an unkempt appearance, of course, and they might be, because then you're disreputable for the lay donors, and lay donors won't give you any money anymore or any gifts anymore. I mean, to the monastery, of course. So, what does it mean and how to avoid it? So these are clothes. Now, what do you think? How do you take care of your clothes? What would a good monk do with his clothes? What will you do?
Wash them and mend them.
Wash them, yeah, regularly, yeah, and mend them, yeah, sure, yeah. Other things?
They do have a needle.
Yeah, they do have needles, yeah. So it's part of their, and that's why you see they have needles. And they should have needles. Why do they need needles? And then you start to look for keywords. The needle is for this or that. Yeah? Yeah. Other things you can do with your clothes, you think? Should they be very beautiful? No, not too much. No, not too much. But can they be really worn out? Can clothes be worn out? Have holes in it? Washed so many times that. Is that possible? Sorry? Only in exceptional cases. There are a few monks in the Vinaya, I'm speaking historically of the Vinaya, and probably also historically, there are a few monks who lead a more ascetic life, and you know that the Buddha also, or the texts at least, say that this was possible with the Dhutangas, for instance, that you can have an extra ascetic life if you want to. But generally, most of the people, no. They need to have this unkempt appearance, so their clothes need to be okay, but not too okay. Colors, can they be beautiful colors? No. They should be kind of non-beautiful color. But what's a non-beautiful color? Huh? Bright colors are out of the question. So this must be very Chinese then, if this kashaya. And you don't find any references in whatsoever text to bright colors in Indian context. Shoes, why shoes? Well, shoes are a very interesting thing because shoes, actually the ideal would be not to have shoes. The ideal would not be not to have clothes. Why do you need to have clothes? Why don't we run around naked? Do we have anything to be ashamed of? So why clothes?
Protection from the elements.
Protection from the elements. That's one of the really important things, yeah. So Buddhists would say we need protection. The same thing with shoes. But I asked you the question, do we have anything to be ashamed of? Yes, in Buddhism. We have a body that we sometimes might be ashamed of.
Yes, in the precepts, monastic, single monastics to focus on, these are the reasons I am wearing the clothes.
Yeah.
Such as, if a mosquito bites, I have to protect it.
Yeah. Yes.
The weather,
Yeah.
the heat, warm,
Yeah.
cold, so I have to protect myself.
Yes.
So I need a cloth.
Yeah. Indeed.
And maybe other insects might bite me.
Yes.
Snakes.
Yes, yes.
I have to protect myself.
Yeah. So that's one very important reason. Weather elements, protect yourself against mosquitoes. Yeah, sure. But also not attracting attention. That's the avoidance of emotion of other people, of lay people, when you walk around naked, which is apparently very much important, of course, for women even. Yeah? Women should not even show they are women. So that's that's of course a gender topic again. There are a lot of clothes that nuns should wear that actually hide the fact that women have breasts, for instance. So that's another thing. Or we have to be ashamed of is that shame. Sometimes it's shame. I'll try to show you some examples. And when I say shame, I have to find the word shame in the text. I'm not going to put it on the people. So try always not to say, I think it is shame. Well, we might think that, but how do you prove it? You have to look what the text say. And if the text say you should feel some shame for this or that, then you say, the text say that you have to be ashamed of this or that. Yeah? So I'll try to give you a few examples. Text will very often say, don't show your body, for weather elements and so on, but also not to give, not to attract sexuality, of course, especially for women. Yeah.
And in the case of Buddhist monks, it also is part of their identity.
Yes.
Because otherwise they could be naked ascetics.
Indeed.
So this is also an
Indeed.
identity.
Yeah, absolutely. It becomes then very much an identity thing. Yeah.
Why is it that maintaining the public image in front of the lay donors is so important, given that donors didn't always mean laity, as in if you look at the early donating inscriptions, mostly monks themselves were donating.
Yes.
And then if you look at Bible period Buddhism in stupa sites like Bharul Sanchi, they were owning landed estates and they were, engaging in business transactions. So why do you think that there's a divergence in terms that when the Vinaya books are mentioning, you have to maintain a certain public image in front of the lay donors, whereas, in practical life they are not that important?
I think in practical life they're also very important, but not only important. If you see in the inscriptions, you see very often monastics are the donors, but you can as well see lay people are the donors. So it's not that lay people don't donate. By the way, donors, again, in India, can be very often monastics. It's much less the case in China. But maybe Tunhuang is again there on the edge. My answer would be that, but that's of course a hypothesis, that also in India, monks and nuns were very much still living with their community. So the difference between being a lay and a monastic is not so big. If you see Shane Clark's work on family matters, you see that it's not like this and that. Yeah? But the Vinaya is for the identity, I think, it's written for an identity of monastics. I think really the Vinaya rules wanted to try to give a lifestyle and an identity to the monastic community. And therefore I think they try to push away a bit the other, and certainly the other that is very close, which is family, which is the Jains. So, because the closest other is the most or difficult maybe, or the most problematic for your own identity. Not the very far away other, but the other that is very close. So I think that's why the Vinaya texts try to give this identity and say you should do that, and sometimes it's a very small difference. But they make it important because it's their identity. And this is also with the clothes. Even if their lifestyle is not so different, the clothes makes a difference. So that's really what is very important. Yeah. And it becomes, of course, much more the case once we enter into the very normative phase of Central and South China. And it's this identity thing. That's very important. But shoes, the identity would actually call for having no shoes. But you have to protect yourself, again, against the dirt. So that means that shoes symbolize also uncleanliness. But they also protect you against the dirt. So it's a very difficult item of the setting of for monastics. And for instance, I like your remark on but you have Vinaya say that you should put on wooden shoes in the monastery to protect yourself against snakes. But then you also have Vinaya saying you should not put wooden shoes in the Vinaya, because if you step on a snake, you will kill the snake. So it depends a bit what's the most important, your own protection or the life of the snake. I like this kind of discussions, you know. Both are probably right, but you have to choose. You cannot. And of course, there are discussions on leather. Silk also, but very often on leather, wealth, frivolity of the shoes, and links to impurity, because once you have identity, you get this kind of thing, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're not a good man. So this is then lesser moral value, and I would argue that this is growing in China with people like Tao Xuan and other masters. The shoes, for instance, should never be close to the begging bowl. I mean, if you take off your shoes, which basically in the village you should do, not in China, but in India, you should not put it in the same bag as the begging bowl, because the begging bowl has to be very pure. If you put your shoes close to it, you actually make a very big mistake. I cannot go into details. These are all articles and chapters I've written, so if you want to, just go to my bibliography. Sleep. Why is sleep so important? Well, you already have a few things here, but what do you think it means? Loss of control during sleep. What would that mean? Yes, Sven.
Oh, well, there's an article I remember being written about the debate about ejaculation and wet dreams of men during sleep. And the question is, was the monk in control of his sexuality while
yes.
having that way?
Yeah. So this kind of things, your body does things that you, when you are awake, you probably don't want to happen. You can have the problem that Ben was just mentioning, but you can also speak during your sleep. Are you guilty? I hate this. But you're sleeping. Is that wrong? That's also the reason why monastic people cannot sleep with lay people. And you see, here again we have this difference. But then, yeah, well, sleep with lay people, but how long? Maybe a few days.
Like if you look at the Pachupannavattu of the Jatakas, you see monastics often, maybe in the same hall they are sleeping
yes.
together, and then Buddha is giving a sermon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Staying back.
And that's again, so you see, you should not, but then maybe a few days. Practical reasons probably. The main reason they want to avoid it is the loss of control during your sleep. And sometimes also here you can have shame, especially men here, or because their penis is standing up at night, and then someone sees it, and the next morning he has been told, you know what happened during the night, and the monk is feeling very much ashamed. So there you have the word shame, you see? So they were anxious about sleep. In China, you will see that people will even try to avoid sleep, to limit sleep as much as possible. Not so in India.
Also, in Bali, I'm not sure. says yama, mentioned the yama, and the period.
Yes.
What period to what period was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the control is there also.
Yeah.
You cannot sleep over.
Yeah, so one tries to control it, and it's already in the Vinaya, but in China, one sees this control mounting. While in India, when you see the hours that people are supposed to sleep, I don't know if they ever or did that, it feels like it's more healthy. While you see in some Chan monasteries, it's the deprivation of sleep becomes a kind of ideal for some monks. You don't see that so much in India. In India, it's more sleep, but not over and over. Also, laziness, of course, the idea that people would be lazy. Yeah, you also find it, don't sleep too much because lazy. And then you have rules like elderly people, elderly monks, they can sleep a bit more, but please make sure the laity doesn't see it. So in a room where other people would not immediately see it, of course, if you're old, you can sleep during the day a bit more. So you get a lot of discussions, and of course I cannot go into detail, but the Vinaya, what I want to convince you today, is that the Vinaya has a lot to say about all these things. Look for terms, look for value terms, and today with all these databases we can do it, of course. Look to all the words that say something on sleep, and then look around what people say, what the Vinaya texts say about it. Why? And try not to put your own ideas, which is very difficult sometimes, but try not to put your own ideas into the mouth of the texts. Try to find the words in the text, and you will find a lot. And sometimes you don't find it. What I could not find, for instance, is on menstruation. Menstruation is a lot discussed in Indian Vinaya, not one word when you go to China. It seems to disappear from the world. Although there are women, and obviously they had a problem. But not one discussion on what to do. Very different from the Pali Vinaya, for instance. There.
In Sangha, this is the second precept.
Yes, and indeed, in the Indian context, it is a practical problem you deal with. The Chinese context, people probably dealt with it, but they don't write anything on how to, what one should do, which material to use, which I would have liked to see. I would have liked to see what people do. In India, you can describe it. Yeah? You can see, and actually, the Indian, for instance, nuns are allowed to go out. They just have to tell the donor, the lay family, probably they're very close, but they have to tell, oh, you know, I have my period, so please don't put me on the nicest cushion you have in your room. Can you imagine that we would say that? No, I don't think so. I mean, I would never say, if I go to family or friends, don't put me on this white coach, you never know what happens. Well, just tell you, this is possible in the Vinaya. But once it comes to China, no word. So I'm sorry, this chapter is not in my book for that reason. I don't have any material. Sometimes you won't have any material and you can't do anything. Movement and sport, that's the article I'm working on now with Melody. It's finished actually. Again, what is sport? You have to define it. What is play? What is a game? What is movement? I took here a definition from Alan Goodman. Physical contest is then sport. Was there sport? Not so often, but there was certainly a lot of movement, and more there are games. There are positive identity of moving, taking care of, training the body. There's negative idleness, uselessness, lack of seriousness, chance, gambling, and so on. I'll try to give you a little bit more details later on this. It's a very interesting topic also, certainly in modern times, what religion and sport might mean to each other. It's also in a Buddhist environment. So the sources, I will not go into that too often or too long, because I'm sure that, Stuart, you're going to deal with this for the rest of the week. So okay, you will hear a lot. Vinaya, Chinese commentaries and manuals, Bodhisattva rules, travel reports, and for China, of course, if you want to go beyond that a bit, the rules of purity, the Qin Kui, are also quite interesting in that respect. And you know the Vinayas, and this afternoon you're going to start with the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya. There is a reason for that, but I think Stuart will explain why the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya is so important. So I'll skip this part. The historical value, I'm sure that Stuart is also going to say that. Well, of course, they are normative texts. So normative text, remember my do not drink, and then we have water. So what does it mean? But to create an ideal setting is also important. We can learn a lot about what the ideals of a community are and what the ideal identity of a community might be confronted with others. That's a very important thing. Jan Netjer also has a very interesting concept, which is incidentals. I don't know if anyone has heard about what she means by incidentals in text or Vinaya text. It's a very interesting thing. She explains it in the book A Few Good Men. You might know that book, yeah?
Yeah, it's if you close read Vinaya texts, you can get a lot more than just the regulation. But there's any kind of detail that's described can be of value to reconstruct the historical.
Yes, indeed. And why does she call it incidental, do you think?
Because for the monks writing Vinaya, those kind of details would not really matter.
It would not, yeah. These details that are not really matter. For instance, how do you make the mosquito net? A few tips, but the main idea was you shouldn't kill, you should be careful and so on. That's the point. And then incidentally, the authors write something. Yeah, it happens to be there. It's never at the core of the message. And okay, with our databases that we have today, when you look for terms, you find mosquitoes in the strangest places, but it tells you something about the mosquito. And this is also what Shane Clark has insisted upon, that the object and the practices are at least imaginable. If you discuss, for instance, scissors, then you should know what a scissor is. Of course, what is a scissor? That's another thing. You can maybe rely on archaeology too, because you have the word scissor in Chinese. Does it mean we had scissors also in India? Luckily, scissors have been found a lot in India. They look very similar to what we have today. So we know, okay, scissors are scissors. And you can even show a picture if you want. So things must be imaginable, probably most of the things, maybe not everything, but most of the things. Otherwise, how would people understand it? Certainly in manuals. I mean, if I say you cannot use brib, 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 well, what is brib, brib, brib? If you say that too often, I will not be a good teacher.
I think in some other situations, something like, say, in America, we change the time twice a year. Now, monks are not supposed to eat after 2 fingers passing, right? Now, time is changed. What should I do?
Yeah.
One. The second is, I'm not supposed to touch coin, money. I have to take the bus. What should I do?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the situations.
Yes, absolutely. And if in the text you have something like, you should not touch a coin, you have to imagine what the coin is. And that's what people discuss. Is a coin also a credit card? Is that a coin? If I give you a ticket for the bus, it's value, but can you use it? Is that a coin? So this kind of things, they will be discussed. And not only in contemporary setting, which Jutsu Lung or Melody, she has written a whole article on coins in Chinese, so how the people in China would deal with it. But also in the past, and surprisingly a lot. So that's very interesting, of course. What should I do if people change time? Huh? Yeah, but imagine, yeah, you have your nice regulations, you want to stick to it, and then they say, summertime. Well, that's a very intriguing problem. So you can corroborate, of course, also with relevant context, paintings, and so on, and try to see where you get. Okay. Let me show you a few things, just a few. Bathing. I will not go over every detail, but nakedness is already a problem in India, and you have to find what they say. And what they say is that nakedness is a problem of respect and sexuality. Now, respect, to give you an idea, seniors should not bathe with juniors. And why is that? Well, you might have something on your body that then deteriorates your status as a teacher later. Imagine you go with your teacher and you take a shower in, I don't know, we have also here gyms, and the shower you can take is open gym, which for some people is open showers, which for some people is troublesome. So women would take a shower naked together. I never do. Honestly, I'm very honest, I would not like to take a shower naked with my students. Because the next day I'm standing in front of them, I have to teach. Well, this is exactly the problem discussed in the bathing rooms of the monastics. So, and I think we can imagine that. But maybe in some other settings, people say, why do you care? Why do Buddhists care? It's the balance between respect and the fact that the body is just a body and you shouldn't attach too much attention to it. But this balance is different from time and setting and so on. But a very interesting problem. Filth is linked to a lack of decorum, and it will more and more be physiomoral. This is also what Susan Mortzik discusses. So outward features mirror inner features. And in China, it will even be linked to karmic return. Before you say that, you have to find the passages saying that. A filthy man is a bad man. A filthy man shows bad thoughts. Yeah, you have to find these passages. Yeah, don't think yourself that this is the case. Try to prove it. Always have the reaction, prove it. Yeah, prove it. So, in China, the bathing house is changing completely, but in India, it's not really a bathing house, it's probably more a sweating house. So I'll skip this, but I'll send this, Ben will send this PowerPoint to you, and you will find it. But for instance, in India, what is still allowed is massage, which is very touchy, of course, if you give a massage. Don't think you will find this in Chinese context. So, but you can see a lot. It's rather a sweat house, though. In China, it's still a group activity, but one is probably never naked. In India, nakedness is a problem, and they try to avoid it a bit, but seniors can bathe with seniors together being naked and even giving each other a massage, if you're careful. China, probably never naked. Decorum, respect, dignity, and shame. You will find many more references to shame in a Chinese context. Linked to health, this is typically I Ching. Sometimes I suspect because he is a traveler monk and he really needed to take care very much of his health that he is always insisting on this. And of course, you will find this associated to purity and karmic return, because if you don't clean yourself, you'll have bad karma in the future, and you are not pure enough. And you see how it develops. This is just a bathhouse in Tiantongshan. I took this from, I should check. I forgot from which book I took it from. But you see, you have Bhadrapala, who is the Bodhisattva presiding. By the way, to give you an example of purity, he obtained enlightenment when he entered the bathing house as a layman. And he saw how people clean themselves outside, and hops, he was cleaned inside. And so that's a real example of purity. Yeah? And you see people sit here. This is water. This is the heater. This is the screens. So they sit behind the screen, but they still sit together. But they have some clothes on. They leave some clothes here, but they have bathing clothes on. So they're not sitting naked next to each other. I thought, and this is a mistake of myself, I thought in my imagination that people would sit with their feet in the water, but when working on the shoes, I saw they don't. They don't sit with their feet in the water. But, you know, that's sometimes we all make mistakes, yeah? Because I was thinking, you know, have the water there, they sit on the edge, they splash water on them, and in my imagination, they had their feet in the water. No, wrong. So you keep on discovering things, okay? You have, they can wash their hands, and they have clothes to dry, and so on. It's quite complex image. I will skip this, but I'll just tell you that you could compare all these things also to the Taoist, and generally the Taoists, they make a close copy of the Buddhist guidelines, but I think they push purity even further. Inside and outside is even more connected in the Taoist setting than in the Buddhist setting. And there is a ritualization that might be pushed by the Taoists, because the Taoists, they have much more rituals to clean your hands before a ceremony and so on. And I think the Buddhist might be inspired by this way. Do we have Confucian ideas also on it? Yes, of course. I mean, I don't very much like what John Needham wrote here, but I just mention it. He wrote, an Indian emphasis on personal cleanliness powerfully reinforced the indigenous prescriptions. I have a little bit of problems with this indigenous and Indian and so on. But there is something into it in the sense that if you call indigenous Confucian, well, Confucian also has a pure mind and a clean body of the Junzi. Bathing is a symbol of distinction, and there is a strong aversion to nakedness in Confucianism. Might, of course, incite monks to also be more averse to nakedness. The toilet, decency, yeah, the toilet is great, because that's the most difficult thing. So it's a great example if you want to work on this. There will be a conference or a workshop in Heidelberg in the end of November, beginning of December probably, organized by Anna Andreeva on wastes and how to deal with human waste in religion and Buddhism also. So very interesting thing. So of course there is a lot of things to hide. The ideal would be that you don't go to the toilet. But as you know, Buddhists eat more than Jains eat. So you have to eat. And when you eat, well, there's something coming out the other side. So you have to clean your mouth, and you have to clean the result. There's a lot of things that people use. There are also urinals, and decency is one of the main topics here. One is very much afraid of the loss of respect and decorum. Noise you make when you go to the toilet is called as especially embarrassing. So all these kind of things. Attention to hygiene? No, not really. Attention to cleanliness, not really hygiene. So try to, if you write on body, try to make a difference between to be clean and to be hygienic. Nowadays, we connect that. They did not. Yeah? So that's important to know. Yeah? More than the case on bathing, purity is important. Oh, sorry. I'll give you one example. I mean, I don't have so many examples here, but there is a Brahman, and this is the Mulasarvastivada, which is probably a later story. So there is a Brahman who wants to go into a community that is clean, and he does not find a community that he wants to live with. So he sees Shariputra, and Shariputra feels that the Brahman is following him in, and he goes to the toilet and leaves the door open. We learn a lot of things. We learn that the toilet has a door. But that's an incidental. Okay, toilet has a door. Okay, you got it. This is important because the further we get, toilets are separate with separate doors. But he leaves the door open for the Brahman to see what he is doing. So the Brahman can see him go to the toilet. When he goes out of the toilet, he cleans himself, left hand, right hand, and so on. And the Brahman is converted to Buddhism. So that's the story. But it focused more and more on purity, and the Mula Sarvastivada is already a little bit ahead of this development. You clean yourself after the toilet, so you must be pure. You are to be, let's say, you are to be consulted. You are to be followed. Of course, there's a contradiction, and Stephen Collex wrote on that. While in meditation the focus is on impurity, the social position of monastics, and I agree with what you say, among each other and among the non-monastics, so it's both, requires a spotless performance. See? At least, ideally. Yeah.
In the toilet, cleaning not only oneself, also the utensils the monk use.
Also the
utensils, the pot.
Yes, yes. Everything needs to be clean. Yeah.
Depending on that, there is an incident, of course you are aware of that. Schism took place between two groups of monks because one monk did not clean the pot.
Yeah.
Not only cleaning, the turning upside down.
Oh, okay.
Because if it keeps straight away, there's a water may generate mosquitoes.
Yes.
So
mosquitoes again, you see.
So Vinaya prohibited.
Yeah.
Monks not keep it straight.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's an interpretation. But it's a very interesting interpretation of the mosquitoes getting in and so on. It's the animals generally, snakes also. Imagine you go to the toilet and. So, but you're right, yeah, and even schisms, yeah, even or schisms may be a big word, but fights or split of communities, separation happens according to the text, at least, on these kind of issues. So again, it's not just a minor trivial thing. These things always happen. Yes. China, well, again, a lot of stipulations. New is the use of paper. There's a lot of written on that paper might have been used in India, probably not. Indeed also some silk, but the paper is also getting there as toilet paper. The use of water increases in China, much more water. But for the rest, it's very much the same. Respect, shame, purity, you'll find all these words. By the way, paper cannot have characters on it. Why?
They're sacred.
Yeah. You don't clean your button with the words of the Buddha, but also not with the words of Confucius. So they just don't do that.
What about like contracts?
They say
Some people did.
probably they might have done waste paper, yeah, but this is the information I don't have. The information that it says is that you should not clean yourself with the words of the Buddha or Confucius. That's a contract. I don't know.
I remember in ancient China, they basically would not discard strips of paper with writing. They'll keep them.
Yeah, keep them. They try to keep everything, but contracts might be kind of, I don't know.
Well, but they would be reused in all sorts of
They would be reused, yeah. So that's why I'm doubting a bit. You also have them reused in shoes, for instance, which is also a dirty place to put some of the contracts. That's in Turfan. We found, well, not me, but archaeologists found contracts in the shoes, actually. So it's a very interesting. So contracts, I would doubt a bit. That might be waste paper, yeah. But you should also, for instance, sorry.
I remember that in China, just mentioned that some paper with the characters on it will not be discarded. But if we want to discard it, we will put it on some kind of stupa and we burn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a ritual. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but ritual burning is not really discarding. Of course, you do something with it. It's not just throw it away. Yeah. So, but yeah, some things, still to discover there. There are other means to clean, but I will not go into detail. But you have to clean also the utensils you use. So that's very important. And of course, in Chinese universities, you can get a lot of karma if you volunteer to clean the toilets. Yeah? So in the Chin Kui, it will be asked even of seniors to clean the toilets as a sign of humility. So and to get karma. So karmic return again added in China, and a lot of focus on the purity. This is basically what the toilet looked like in China traditionally. Of course, in the monasteries, you are not supposed to have the animals, although there's a lot of discussion. So that's one of the next things I would like to see. How far can we use animals? That doesn't mean kill animals, but can we make use of animals? And maybe even in early toilets, you could discuss if they have never used pigs for the toilet. I would not say no, exactly because what you, Stuart, was saying. People were not so different from life, you know. I mean, you can take habits into the monastery, but in the city monasteries, it's clear that the animals would, of course, be much less allowed. So it depends a bit on what. There's also stories, but I still have to work on that. Stories that people say in China, but I still have to work on that part. So. Just the first reading, that they say, oh, you know, when a sheep or an animal is entering the monastery, you feel pity for them. But when you kill a mosquito, you just kill it. Not okay, is then the result. So, but that shows again, what are these sheep doing in the monastery? So that's what I'm thinking always. So I'm always trying to find angles which are different from the main topic of the rule. So.
And what's happening in that?
Oh, this is the toilet.
On the right?
Whoa. You go in here, your waste is going down, and they eat it.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Not only your body waste, but also other waste, because pigs eat everything. So this is a very common toilet in. That's a way to get away of waste. I mean, that's how.
How about the pig's waste?
Well, you use it for fertilizer on the field.
Yeah, I came from when I was young. We had a similar setting in my house, and it's actually the waste of the human waste and the waste from the pigs share the same. Home around to keep the waste.
Yes.
Yeah. So the pigs don't eat.
Yeah, but here in earlier times they do. I mean, yeah, because pigs they eat everything. That was really the way to get all the waste out. So not only your human waste, it's a kind of waste hole. And pigs eat a lot. But then of course you have to take out everything and then put it on the field. Yeah. But that was the way to make toilets, because then you don't have to dig. You don't need to dig a pit, and because that's also troublesome. You need to dig a pit and then you put in, it's full, and you have to. This is never full. So and you have descriptions of that, and you, of course in the Han times you find a lot of this kind of places. But you're right, of course. I mean, I don't know if they eat everything, but they eat a lot. They eat a lot, like chicken too. But okay, it's. And of course you take the waste and you use it. But again, can we use animal? To a certain extent. There's a lot of discussion also on bees. Can you use bees and so on? Something I would like to work on also in the future. But you also had this kind of toilets. So there's still, this I took from Yang Yuping. He is, or she is, I don't know, an archaeologist. This is also in tombs. He or she, I don't know, maybe some. I haven't read a lot of more of this person, but he made or she made a lot of pictures on findings in tombs, and in the book it's discussed that this is the female, and this is very rare, very rare. This is the common. So you find this very rarely. I'm not convinced that this would be the female toilet. I don't see why. It looks more like for elderly people who have difficulties to squat would be my hypothesis. But okay, it's rare. This is what we will find in monasteries then also. So this is the type that you can find then in monasteries. People were squatting. Also urinals were squatting, not like. There's a lot of discussion on when did man start to stand up. In the Vinaya, this is seen as a very dirty practice. Okay, next time you go to the toilet, think about that. This is how the latrine looks in Jinshan. This is 13th century, like the other. So this is 13th century drawing made by the disciples of Dogen, by the way. Dogen traveled to China and wanted an ideal monastery to be built also in Japan. And in order to do so, in the large monasteries, he asked his disciples to make drawings, and these drawings have then been brought to Japan, where they still are available. What do we see? These are the toilet, and what do you see in front of it always? Is this line, what would that be? And these lines, they are actually, well, you also have a description with it, but what do you think it is? The lines, and this is, and what is this then? No? What would that be?
Water.
No, water is here. So, incense. For what reason? Smell. Smell is really getting more important in China. It should not smell. So you put incense in front of every toilet. I don't know if this was really the case, but they really, and these are doors. So they're all separate, individual pits, ideally. Huh? This is, by the way, a very big incense pot. I'm thinking if you need this kind of incense, it must have smelled a lot. Lamps, all kinds of products, pumice stone in the shape of fish, which is a particular setting, of course, in China. They like the fish. But you have a lot of products to wash yourself. You have water here also. These are the clothes. Basically, I'm not 100% sure, but basically, I think you go into the toilet naked in China. But it's hard to prove because a lot of the clothes are here and they have to be tagged. Why are they tagged? By the name or a sign on it. They look the same, yeah. You have to find your clothes. Yeah, but all these practical things. Yeah. This is to dry. Then clothes that you use after washing to dry yourself. It's not, I could not find out 100% if there are toilet clothes. In India, yes, but in China, maybe naked. And what would be the problem with having clothes in the toilet?
They'll get dirty.
They get dirty, yeah. In India, in the Vinaya, you find a lot of ways. It's a very funny part, actually. How you should squat, and then squat a bit. Wait, I'm not going further. Huh? So, and they really explain how to do it. In China, you don't find these things. You find a lot of regulations on how to put your clothes here on a kind of line, and then probably naked, but I'm not 100% sure.
Is it possible that they just hang the outer rope?
You don't even go with the outer rope into the latrine, so you don't even take it there. Yeah.
If toilet is something which is not kind of, it could, as in not going naked, could also be related to the concept of ritual pollution.
Yes, it's pollution of the clothes. So, but the only thing why I'm doubting a bit is that you have to go naked and from here to here, and people can see you. And nakedness is such a big problem. So maybe it's kind of waist, small waist cloth, like in the bathing room. But no information on that. So, but anyhow, it's a very complex setting. Huh? There are also urinals. And there are also ways to get way of the water here. So it's and where to build. Taoshuan also has place to it, preferably next to running water, at the edge of the monastery, and so on. Taoist, well, again, purification incantations a lot, and you will see it also in the Qin Kui. So I think the purification incantations might have inspired monks in the big monasteries in China, because don't get me wrong, the Qin Kui, they are meant for the large state monasteries, not for the smaller settlements, and that's a completely different story. And you have to be spotlessly clean. That's what the Taoists say. To give you an example how in the later phase, that's already for me very late, that's this is a text, the Qin Kui, from the 14th century. Whoever goes to the toilet and does not recite these magic sentences will never be able to purify himself. No matter how often he goes to the shrine hall to worship, it will be of no use. Therefore, one must uphold, it's a kind of dharani that people start to say from the 12th, 13th century on, and recite them 7 times at every occasion. In this way, the ghosts and the spirits will always accompany and protect the one who is reciting. So you get even purification incantations in Buddhist monasteries. This is growing, but you already have it a bit in the Avatamsaka Sutra. So it's not completely new. For instance, here, this is what the Avatamsaka Sutra would say: those relieving and washing themselves should silently express a wish for all sentient beings to be free from defilement. And in modern, at least nunneries, I mean, I've never been to a male toilet, obviously, in a monastery in China, but in a nunnery, some nunneries, when you squat, you will read in front of you the sentence to be recited, which is that by getting all the waste out of your body, you also get the bad ideas out of your body, and you wish for all sentient beings to happen. That same thing happens to them too. So this is what you get. And of course, very limited information and confusion text on this, but let's say that cleanliness was very important and decency also for bathing, so you can assume that it was the same for toilet, but you don't find a lot on the Junes, or how does he have to go to the toilet. Robes. Yesterday we saw a few robes, but these are the traditional robes that, at least in the Yulin cave from the 8th century, that what is you are supposed to put on. I don't know if everyone was exactly wearing this, but the ideal is that this is the kashaya. So you see it here. I made a little mistake in the book that I wrote on the body, because I thought this was a woman. My mistake, it's a man. They're both male, and on the other side of the cave you have the females. But I didn't, and you know, once you have the mistake in it, you don't correct it anymore, because you think long hair looks a bit female, isn't it? Well, at least, yes, bear with me and say yes, and she looks a bit female, but it's a he. So beard is shaven, hair is shaven. The Vinaya actually forbids scissors, the use of scissors. And at least on the murals, you will never see someone shaven with a scissors. So it's always with a knife.
Is there a reason why the scissors are forbidden?
No, I couldn't find a reason.
Is it to imitate how the Buddha cut off his hair with a knife?
These are all things that I would like to say, but as I don't find the real reason in the text, this, I don't know. So, I don't know. But scissors are forbidden. So, and if I don't find the reason why, I will not mention it, or not speculate. But I think you could be right, because they want to do it in the way the Buddha did it, but on the other hand, they don't say.
Just did this.
Yeah, but they don't say it. But they don't say why scissors are forbidden, and I couldn't find any reason why. Maybe I should look for scissors more. Put scissors in the database and see what comes out one day. Why scissors would not be okay. But anyhow, also here we see knives. So these are the robes. So we already discussed it a bit. To prevent the robe from being dirty, to clean the robe, wash, beating, dyeing. You find a lot of information on how to do that. Special attention to the outer robe, which you even don't put into difficult situations. So you don't even take it to a bathing room, then you don't have to take it out also. A lot of care, you will see differences here also. For instance, to give you one example, the Sarvastivada would say you use a wooden board. The Mula Sarvastivada would say don't use wooden boards, use your hands. Why would that be? They give reasons. The reason is the same for both, but the solution is different. Why? What's wrong with stone? And then wooden, but no wooden, hands. Well, think of your own clothes. When do you do hand wash?
The delicacy.
The delicacy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's too delicate. Yeah. Yeah. So, but this is in the text. So it's not. I could think about that, but I have to find it in the text. Beating. One beats out the dust, but the Sarvastivada says, please use tin cans. Yeah, because otherwise, yeah. Perfect dye. Perfect dye. Cleanliness, so it has to be perfect. But, and this is maybe interesting. So, perfect but not perfect. So, you put here, never multicolored because this is beautiful, but exceptions inside the monastery. Because you might have received something. And then you can have multicolored robes inside the monastery as long as no one else outside the monastery sees you with it. Certainly not to be shown to everyone. The colors should not be bright colors, they should be bad colors. Or single colored bad. Why? But what is why? They should not be superior, but some people then say, yeah, but faded colors are also not okay, because then it's too old. You need new. So a balance again here. Very interesting, the colors. What colors are they? I think you could write libraries on it and we would never agree. Pali Vinaya, possible dark green. Of course, colors are one of the most difficult things to translate. What does it mean? Dark green, mud color, black also. I've never seen a monk in black on any picture, but black. Chinese, you know this Qing color, blue-green. Black and magnolia, again black. Never seen on any mural a black monk, but Gei. What does Gei mean? Black, but what kind of black? Sarvastivada, Mula Sarvastivada, again Qing, mud, and a kind of red, you see? So the colors differ along to the Vinaya. Some people even say that you could identify the Vinaya tradition by the color of the robes. Is that an ideal picture or is it a real picture? I don't really know. Yes.
A text that talks
Yes.
about that
Yeah.
the Dharma Buddha had black
Yeah.
robes and
Yeah, he has a text on that, I know. But if you see murals,
And an argument could be made that, for instance, the Japanese monks wearing black robes could be an influence from Tang China when Chinese monks were supposedly also wearing black. But as you said, you haven't seen.
no, I haven't seen a visual representation of
But
it.
there is this term that is used for calling Chinese monks that involves the word black.
Black, yeah. So I don't know what black exactly means actually. I'm still, but there's work to be done. All this work is not finished, but I don't know what black means in this context. Maybe other people do. I mean, I haven't read everything which is available, so if someone does.
I accidentally read a little bit about that because a student asked me why are Japanese monks wearing black clothes, and I was like, started thinking about it.
Might be, yeah, because you see black is there in many Vinayas. Another interesting thing are the spots. So your robe should not be too perfect, because then you're attached to the robe. So the Vinaya says you have to add spots. Yes?
the color seems to be symbolic here. Symbolic. When, so for example, when you see yellowish leaves in the tree, that is mature. So when a monk wears a robe which is yellowish, that is the person is mature.
I haven't seen that yet, yeah, but that's possible, that's something else to be added, yeah, that is connected to the age or, yeah, or the...
Black, it is, I think, symbolically the death.
Yeah, maybe. But you see, interpretations on color are many. And in the discussions on color, which is an identity issue, in all parts of the Buddhist world and in all times, are really multifold because it's so identity making. I haven't seen, but I'm sure you're right, on the color, on the seniority or the maturity of monks in a different color. Yeah, I would not be surprised to find it. In China, you have the purple robe discussion, which is also kind of a different hierarchy. So color is very important. What I know about China is that one still adds the spots. They have to be between 1 and 9, but then if they're too big, then people say, oh, you have a dirty robe. So they are also small. And the Vinaya allows that. So yeah, well, if they are too obvious, put them somewhere, but be aware that there are some spots so that you don't get attracted to the beauty of your robe. So there's a lot of discussion on robes, and as I say, time, space, all will influence the interpretation. And certainly colors, I mean, really colors is one of the most difficult things to discuss. What is a color?
And I thought I remember reading that the word kashaya itself translates as something like ochre.
Yeah, that's what some people say, that is the basis of it, yeah. But even then, if you see the colors that you find in the Vinayas, it's not really ochre. Here maybe this kind of reddish things. I also sometimes don't understand the word because you have different reddish colors mentioned and no idea what exactly it meant. You need to find silk or other cotton and then try to see how people name it. So color studies are quite important here. Why? Well, interesting also, we have discussed already about robes, but another thing is the new robe is a kind of introduction into the community, which is linked to the identity, of course. But when you get a robe, you really enter the community. And then, of course, filth and so on. Some texts even say that the robe is an extension of the body, which reminds you maybe of Vigarello, remember? The French, or the one who studied on France, who said, you know, I mean, cleanliness is shown through the robe, actually. Well, you find this also in the Mula Sarvastivada Vinaya, for instance, or even in some other Vinayas, but certainly in the Mula Sarvastivada Vinaya, where you see that the robe is like the skin, it's a kind of skin, and of course you have a growing symbolic value. For instance here, to show you a few things here, the Mahishasaka Vinaya says one should protect the robe as one's own fragile skin. So I'm looking then for these sentences. I'm not going to invent that the robe is the skin. I have to find these sentences. The Mahasangika Vinaya says, if the robes are filthy, one has to repeatedly wash, dye, and stitch them. One should see one's robes as one's own skin. The rules on robes are a shirt. And the Mula Sarvastivada also compares robes to the skin, the begging bowl to the eyes. So you get this kind of similarity. The robes and the skin become one. And certainly here in the Mula Sarvastivada Vinaya, which in this aspect is always, according to me, a bit ahead. In this aspect, I say, because the Mula Sarvastivada Vinaya is immensely complex. Thereupon the Buddha spoke about the way to leave the world. That is the noble truth of suffering, the origin, the cessation, and the path. And he compares it to this. It's like washing the robes. One first removes the filth. When the robes are clean and pure, color can easily penetrate. So when you are clean and pure, the Dharma can easily penetrate. So it's this kind of... The monk Yasha is also like that. He first heard the Buddha speak about the cleanliness and purity of the mind. And actually this is this also. Thereupon, so Shinchi, thereupon he could understand the Four Noble Truths. So you see this kind of metaphor. Clean robe means that the Dharma will enter more easily. Yeah, but it's opposed, of course, to the idea of attachment to cleanliness and my body needs to be beautiful and so on. But these are also, it's more than a robe. These are also things that have been taken into account. So it's again the physio-moral discourse, and you absorb the Four Noble Truths better with a clean robe. Finally, that's what I'm working on today, is the movement. Can monks move? Well, these are the reasons why the Vinaya says yes. I don't know if you agree. If you train your body a bit, you can endure journeys. I mean, if you sit down the whole day, you will not walk far. Able to think. If you move, you think. Less illness, improves digestion, one can concentrate longer. So this is, of course, the walking exercise, the Jingxing, which became very important. But restrict the movement. No jumping, swinging, swaying the arms, and so on. Bad impression. Women are here sanctioned more severely, and commonly in the Vinaya, if a woman moves too much, she's a prostitute, or she behaves like a prostitute. So it's a very negative sentence, which you find very often. When you show you're female by your movements, you immediately get this word in the neighborhood of the sentence. The body should be well covered, should not speak loudly, or should not enter the house of a layman playful and laughing. Doesn't seem like sport will be very attractive to monastics if you see all this. Health concerns in China remain there. Decency remains important. Social pressure also. You can see that they have to, monks ideally should behave well, but, and then it's important in China. Again, Susan Morzik, bodhisattvas use their bodies and their heart minds to transform living beings in positive ways. So virtue gets a specific bodily form. Think about the Buddha. How is the Buddha pictured usually? I don't want to go as far to say a bull of a man like we have in the famous book title. Sorry?
He is the perfect man.
He's a perfect man. Yeah? He's not a weak person with getting tired. No, strong. So it's not only in China that we have this image. It's getting there also in India. It's also important in India. But it's much more stressed upon in China with the bodhisattva concept. By some, I would not say by everyone, but this bodhisattva concept that by showing you're good, you can inspire others. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So virtuous bodies show control of body and mind. And of course in martial arts, this will become very important. A virtuous community with a powerful teaching. I don't say everyone goes for that, but if you're strong, you're powerful, you can do it. A good body is a virtuous body, and a virtuous body is a good body. So one can use the body to present oneself and by extension, one's community. This is one of the reasonings. You could be against it, but people use it. So potentially it attracts also some criticism towards some Buddhist groups who use it. For instance, what if you're born with one arm that is a bit shorter? Is that your karmic result or not? You can do something about it, maybe. If you are a better man, maybe next life your arm will be like this. Is this something or people want to accept or not? There's discussion on that. So it's not... we were asked actually in the book to read, well, because this is a project on the perception of Vinaya today with Esther Bianchi and Daniela Campo. The book is supposed to be finished this summer. It should come out soon then, I hope. But it will take 1 more year, you know that, proofreading and so on. I mean, that's how it goes. But anyhow. And we were asked to read Giorgio Agamben as a common thing, which was interesting in one part, but maybe, I think, in an international settlement, a bit too difficult, maybe. Because, of course, Giorgio Agamben is very much working on Italy and on Renaissance, and a very complex, actually, philosopher. But I found something that I really like. He refers to Seneca, and he says, the self is nothing other than the use of oneself. And I really like that in the Bodhisattva context, because that's exactly what the Bodhisattva is doing. The use of the self, even whatever it might be, kind of abstract self, to help the others. That's the use and usefulness. And so it becomes useful and no longer idle. And you can go very far in this. So it allows for competitive physical activities to become acceptable, strong to show virtue, to transform the others for the better. For those in sports history, like my colleague, this sounds very familiar. And for those who have studied in the United States, this must also sound very familiar. Is a college or a university not much better with a winning team in I don't know what sport, basketball or baseball, or what would be the most prestigious one? What would be what do you want your university to do number one in the, I mean, football, yeah, American football, yeah, if you can win the university team, very great, you have to be proud. You even can hire students that don't really study but are there for the team. Why not? Because you need, well, some Buddhist groups also go that way. For instance, Master Xing Yun tried it. Basketball is a way, especially basketball, because his team was not so good in soccer and gymnastics, so they gave up. But, and I don't want to make fun of him, because I think it's, he got something, probably saw it in the West, and loved it a lot, this idea that basketball can promote Buddhism. And in that context, winning a game gives a good image of Buddhism. Also, Buddhism engages in daily life. You learn to control yourself, it's good for health. In a team, you help each other, you control oneself, you repent when breaking the rules, you tolerate others, and basically, of course, you should also not be unhappy when you lose. But you can see that it would be better to win, because if the Buddha or Buddhism wins the contest, which by the way the Buddha has often done so, you promote Buddhism. So I don't say that every monastery is going along this line, but I just want to show you how regionally and in time one can interpret things differently. And I always tell to my students, of course it's fine to every now and then to have a smile, like we have done, but respect is of course the first thing. If someone says in the past, for instance, or even in the present, I haven't seen it yet, but the monk can fly, then you write, according to the text, the monk says he can fly. Whether or not he can fly, it's not my business. And this is an extreme example, but that's what I mean. I mean, try to understand what the texts say, what the people say, and personally, of course, you can make your own judgment on that, but only personally, and try not to maybe. And a smile every now and then is allowed, because we are human beings, of course. So I also smile a bit when I see the basketball team of Xing Yun. But on the other hand, why not? I mean, it's his way of doing it. So, short conclusions. These are central issues, all to think about. On the body, cleanliness, hygiene, decorum, respect, purity, karmic return. Look for the terms into the text. I will repeat that very often. It are the texts that tell you, and that's what also we are going to read in the next days. The texts have to tell you and try to tell you what people really wanted to write down. Depending on the context, it's very different. Even in China, it can be very different, time, setting, and so on. So cleanliness, you'll find decorum, respect, purity in Buddhist, Taoist, Confucian texts. I think we see an advancing purity threshold in China. Maybe read my articles and try to see if you're convinced. I have distributed one, I always do that when I finish a topic, I try to write one comprehensive article on the full topic, and it's just out 2 weeks. That's for me a little bit the finishing part of this study, then I go to animals, but so you can read it, and please tell me anything about it if you agree or don't agree or whatever. I mean, it's not because I finished the study field that I'm not thinking about it anymore. Karmic return is a central Buddhist concept, but combined to the celestial purity, I think that's one of the factors that made it grow in China. And ritualization grows in both Buddhist and Taoist circles in China. Also ritualization of washing and so on. Balance is a central issue. So austerity, patchwork, but color, spots, and so on. One needs to be spotless, clean, and pure. There's not one clear line in all things that deal with material culture also. It's, as you say, they change the time. What should I do? Very interesting point, by the way. Someone should do some research on that, just to see what you can do. Body and all that is connected, so participate in the physio-moral discourse of purity. And finally, have attention to your sources. I'm working mostly with textual sources and archaeology. If I do field work, I do it together with another scholar because I have basically no time to spend months in monasteries, unfortunately. I mean, or maybe fortunately, because that means that I'm tenured and I have a good position here and I'm responsible for all these things, so I have to be here. So maybe it's fortunately. But I really like to work with other scholars who have different kinds of possibilities, who work on field work, and to combine also anthropology with field work. But I leave this, if you see articles from me here, it's always in collaboration, because myself, I'm more the historical part, working with the results of the archaeology, not being an archaeologist, but working with history, text, commentaries, and context, which would be the historical, political, philosophical, religious context. And think maybe when you go out here about objects, they are imaginable, and what do they mean to the people that use them. So that's my talk for today, as an introduction to Stuart's reading of the text. So thank you very much. If you have questions, please do so. Yes?
I have one question on the problem of hygiene. I realized that hygiene for us is basically the function of bacteria and viruses. So of course, medieval China, they weren't aware about that. But when you say that they wanted to, also, it was said that when they wanted to prevent stagnant water because it might create, it might attract mosquitoes. That's hygiene, right?
It's a practical thing, actually. I mean, it's not really hygiene on your body. The consequence is that the monasteries were more healthy, but they never say that.
So they weren't aware of epidemics?
No, not at all. There is not one sentence in the Vinaya saying the mosquitoes spread diseases.
And not even the spreading of illnesses in between the community. They weren't aware that
They are not discussing it. Only starting in the 11th, 12th century, there you find some references where people say that you have to be careful that you don't spit, because you can spit, but you don't spit into someone else's washing basin, because potentially you could spread diseases.
Also spitting on the grasses.
Yes. Yes, no, spit on the grass is another discussion, how you kill grass, which is important if you also discuss Jain context, because you can kill grass. You cannot kill grass in a Buddhist context. So sometimes it's changed, but sometimes in the text you find and the discussion of the killing of basically grass. You see a development there in the Vinaya, from, well, I think it's a development. And Claire Maas, you might have read some of her work. She also worked here. She also tries to show that these Jain influences are getting out a little bit, transformed a little bit in the Vinaya text. Probably Jain influence, it's always difficult because apart from Jain there were also others, forgotten groups, or so Jain is also very difficult to say what exactly is the other. In the beginning in the Vinaya you see don't kill the grass, then you see don't spoil the grass, don't make it dirty, with stories like this. Again, the nuns. The nuns don't like the noise of actually it's the king living there, and it's a palace, and make a lot of noise. And the nuns have the good idea to put their human waste on the grass next to the palace, where the people from the palace like to enjoy themselves. Yeah, result? Not so good for the reputation of the nuns. And then you have the rule, you know, the introductory stories are always written after the rule. Historically, they are a very different time. And then you have the rule, you should not make the grass dirty. But the reason is no longer you kill the grass. If you read all the text, you will still find a few references to killing the grass. But the most of the stories will go into the direction of waste has to be put in another waste place. So where there is already waste. For instance, if you travel, you don't have a toilet everywhere. You have to look first for a toilet. If there are no common toilets in the village, you should do it close to a wall or something. Yeah, a place where other waste is already heaping up. So that's the idea. Yeah. So hygiene, not really. The only person focusing more on health issues is I Ching. If you say, okay, I want to find disease, spread of disease or things like that, then I Ching is a very good person to look into.